He has a licentiate in spiritual theology with a specialization in formation of priests and religious from the Pontifical Gregorian University, Rome. He has been engaged in formation in his entire priestly life. At the moment, he is the director of postulants in his congregation. We are fortunate to have him with us, and let us listen to him. Now over to Father Maximinius. Father.
Microphone.
Microphone, Father. We can't hear you.
It's off.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay.
Thank you very much, Father Matthew. Yes, I am Father Armin. I am from Indonesia. And I want to confess that my English is not better than, better as yours, no? That's why in this very moment, I was trying to read the reflection that I have made sur Rula. Last time I sent you the first. There were two questions. What we and the formators can do in order to be more conscious in living and personalize the vocational values, terminal and instrumental values in our congregation. And the second one, what we and the formators can do to promote a greater awareness of the various motivations related to our vocation in our congregation and in a specific personality. I consider these topics very important because nowadays there are a lot of people just leave the congregation. Of course, some with a conscious decision, but some with some conscious decision. So, dear fathers, I just go directly to the reflection that I had made to Rula. For the translator, we can just go directly to the second page. I'm not going to discuss all the aspects which Rula had introduced in his research, but I just focus on motivation. Human motivation, according to Luigi Rula, has both a teleological and axiological. The teleological dimension means that every person's motivation and ambitions or attractions are directed to their ultimate ends. In a sense, to say that human motivation is teleological basically refers to the underlying desires of human heart, which always aims at its ultimate end. Human motivation is also axiological because it includes the values that lead to the ultimate end. For consecrated life, especially the candidates, there are 5 key vocational values religious or members of a congregation should have. 2 of these values refers to the end of the process of long life formation and could be called terminal values, union or communion with God and imitation of Christ. The other, there are called instrumental values because they lead to poverty, chastity, and obedience to terminal ones. Any religious or other institutions
comunidad religiosa
demands of its followers these instrumental values that can be understood as institutional ideals. Nevertheless, God's call to religious or consecrated
La
life
llamada a la vida religiosa o a la vida consagrada
a positive
necesitan
response
dos
given by a
tipos de
candidate
respuesta:
or person whose choices are not in
positiva
contradiction with the essential values of religious life. There are, however, other candidates who consciously or unconsciously are guided by values that contradict a genuine religious vocation. A clear indication of the first type of response is the presence in a candidate of inner freedom, good motivation, and right intention. On the contrary, the second type of response shows absence of freedom, selfish motivation, and lack of transparency. Rula's study attempts to evidence an analogical confirmation regarding the manifestation of the mentioned two kinds of response in our consecrated or religious life. It shows also the dynamics of the intrapsychic disposition in us and how they affect and influence our motivation, intention, and freedom in embracing our vocation. In a sense, the purpose of this presentation is to carefully analyze the notion of vocational motivation. However, to understand a person's motivation is to speak of his or her inner tendencies, desires, and attractions towards certain values, which are part of a person's structure in their anthropological potentialities. Anthropological potentialities are the basic elements, the essence of a person, or the inner basis which make a person different from other human beings. Hence, this topic is important because we cannot understand a candidate's or even our own motivation without studying his or our inner dynamic elements or anthropological potentialities. However, I am not going to explain more on theoretical notion, which is also known as a genesis of motivation, because you can just find them on the article which I had sent you. I sent one article yesterday. So dear brothers, dear fathers, let us go directly through the notion of motivation according to Rula. A person's various and dynamic forms of habitual disposition of openness to values are summed up in the theory of Luigi Rula, which is called the three dimension in the human person. Luigi Rula's theory of three dimension constitutes in one single person the three intrapsychic disposition, which influence his exercise of intention, motivation, and freedom for self-transcendence in general, that is, regarding natural values as well as self-transcendent values. The first dimension is characterized by a conscious motivation, rational spiritual tendency, rational desire to see the objects as important in themselves. Aside from that, this dimension is also predominated by values or virtues or by sin. For some who pursue transcendental virtues or values, their action must be based on conscious motivation, freedom, and responsibility to overcome, to renounce, to transcend themselves, and to fix their mind and heart on the supreme value, which is God. For example, those candidates or persons who faithfully observe their personal or community prayer and consciously surrender themselves to God are opening themselves up to be transformed by Him in and through prayer. But others can also consciously choose to the contrary with regard to virtues or values, or to consciously sin. For example, a consecrated person who has professed a vow of obedience consciously does not follow the direction of his superiors, who, after consulting the rules of life of the congregation, decide to move him to another community for a new mission. We can also distinguish among those persons or candidates who are mature and immature in their motivation and vocation by looking at their dispositions or tendencies to action. The immaturity is understood as a conscious disposition to sin, to commit vice, while the maturity of vocation and motivation means a constant or conscious disposition to virtue or vocational values. Aside from this, a candidate or a person mature when there is a central argument between ideal self and actual self. There are two forms of ideal self, which are the self-ideals and the institutional ideals. Institutional ideals are about the perception a person has of the ideals his vocational institution values for its members, while a self-ideal is essentially an ideal feature version of a person that encompasses his personality, beliefs, values, and behavior under various conditions. Hence, a harmony between the self-ideal and institutional ideals means also a harmony between the candidate's or person's motivations, desires, and ideals in relation to what he wants to be and to do in concordance with the ideals of his religious institution. The same harmony has also to be seen in a person's actual self. The actual self is composed of present behavior and the latent self. In the actual self, the harmony can be understood as not being in contradiction between a person's actual manifestation of self-concept, present behavior, with the characteristic of the person, conscious or subconscious. Maturity in this first dimension, therefore, means that all the four elements, self-idols, institutional idols, present behavior, and the latent selves are not in contradiction. For example, a candidate or a person may express that he really wants to be a good member of the congregation of St. Vincent in the future, ideal self. Then during his formation, the congregation offered him vocational values, institutional ideals. These candidates in his daily life faithfully observe those vocational values, present behaviors. Besides, his latent self does not show a contradiction with these present behaviors and the elements of his ideal self. Hence, according to the notion of this dimension, the candidate is mature because there is a central agreement between his ideal self and his actual self. Maturity in this dimension is therefore only for those who consciously love the Lord and their vocation with all their heart and with all their soul and with all their mind. Second dimension. This dimension is constructed by two categories of motivational elements that are present in one single person. The second dimension is the combination of both values, the first dimension, needs, third dimension in one person. Values are lasting and abstract ideals that concern both the current conduct and the final purpose of existence. As for lasting ideals, they differ from simple interests. Then the needs are innate tendencies to action, which arise from a deficit of the organism or natural potentialities inherent in a person. For the explanation of this, you can find it in my previous articles. No? I had sent last time. This dimension may be called the dimension of real good versus the apparent good. Harmony exists to a greater or lesser degree between the real good, the things, objects can help a person to become closer to his terminal vocational values, and the apparent good, unconscious subjective needs that can lead a person away from his vocational values. In the context of religious vocation, it seems that a real good can be understood as a way of life according to the spirit of the vows of poverty chastity, and obedience because they are the instrumental values that can help a candidate to reach his terminal values, union with God and imitation of Christ. The apparent good refers to a person's or candidate's subconscious factors or unconscious needs. Dissonant needs can lead a candidate away from those instrumental values. However, immaturity on this second dimension cannot be called sin, first dimension, because freedom and responsibility are limited by an unconscious state of a person. But it cannot also be named pathology, third dimension, for it is constructed by both the conscious and unconscious states of a person. You may find in a seminary or congregation a candidate or a person who left with these some reasons, due to their wrong motivations, due to their incorrect intention, as a result of their lack of freedom, and so on. From those three common reasons for leaving the seminary and congregation, you will find 6 subconscious needs. The need for knowledge applies to those candidates or person whose motivation for entering and leaving the seminary or congregation is just to have the opportunity to study. The need for achievement applies to those candidates or a person whose motivation to enter and leave the seminary and congregation is merely to allow them to go to another country. The need for security applies to those candidates and a person whose motivation to enter and leave the seminary is a result of their desire just to feel protected by the group in the community. The fourth, the need for recognition and approval apply to those candidates or a person whose motivation for entering and leaving the seminary is the desire for social promotion and status. The fifth, the need for independence, freedom, and autonomy apply to those candidates or person who have entered the seminary or joined the congregation because they were forced to do so. 6, the need for affection and love apply to those candidates or person whose only motivation for entering and leaving the seminary were a result of their wishing to overcome the problems and difficulties of life, and so on. Yes, there is need for achievement, for example. To achieve something is a requirement of healthy personal growth and development. In the context of religious vocation or consecrated person, whatever forms of achievement they are, this is a value that has to be in agreement with the terminal values and instrumental values. This means that the ultimate ends of their achievement have to be centered on God. However, the problem lies with those candidates or person who have entered seminary with an unconscious and not authentic motivation to achieve something which serves only for their personal needs or self-satisfaction. As an example, when I was doing a vocational campaign in Asia, some students expressed that the reasons they wanted to become a missionary was to have an easy life, to be able to study, to be able to work in various offices, to buy a new car, to travel, to visit various countries, or to be, for example, a doctor or a professor. And during formation, I witnessed a lot of candidates who also expressed clearly some of these various incorrect motivations. The third dimension, if the first dimension is predominated only by virtue or disposition to transcendental values, and the second dimension is the combination of both the first dimension and needs, third dimension in one person, the third dimension is primarily related to the motivating force of natural values. In other words, the third dimension is mainly developed by the motivating force of nature rather than self-transcendent values, first and second dimension. A person is in his normal state when there are the qualities and skills that are necessary or required to perform particular activities and functions. This occurs when the candidate or person is able to carry out the vocational project and values, and when he has the ability to control his instinctual desires. This means he's able to master his thoughts, emotions, fears, and reactions to person and events. He is capable of making himself part of the community by respecting the characteristics of each member and has the ability to establish healthy relationships in his life and work, to appreciate the differences and the culture of others, to avoid isolation and non-communication, and so on. However, he is immature when he acts defensively towards others, when he is resistant to the decision of others, or when he becomes rigid in his opinions. It is problematic also when he always needs to be reassured and praised, when he is looking for rewards and enjoyment with childish behavior, when he has low self-esteem and a sense of inferiority. Likewise, it is problematic when he is too much perfectionist, shows passive behavior, or is judgmental and lazy. Aside from these examples, another manifestation of conflicts or immaturity are inherent, for example, cellular phone attachment or addiction, mental illness, problems of psychosexual development, and manifest psychopathology. So, dear brothers, based on my little experience, information, the second dimension is mostly manifested in the life of the candidates. The third dimension is easily seen because this in relating with the normality of the person. For example, if they have a mental illness, immediately we can identify if this person is not suitable to continue his formation. However, when we are talking about motivation, in the formation, I see that the second dimension mostly related because most of the candidate is there in the second dimension. Rula also presented 3 different ways of being motivated. Luigi Rula notes that there are 3 different ways of being motivated. Not all of them are positive. For example, the first way he describes as complacency, namely when a person accepts religious vocational values in the hope of gaining some rewards or avoiding some punishment controlled by another person, group, or institution. Attitudes are not adapted because the individual believes in their content, but simply in order to gain external incentives. The punishment or rewards are not necessarily physical, but more often psychological. Withdrawal of affection, non-consideration, inducing feeling of guilt. The candidate or person who has decided to enter the seminary or join the congregation in order to obtain a privileged social status may be complacent. Those who have rigidly observed the schedule for prayers, for example, but are motivated only by the desire to receive a good evaluation from others are complacent. Those who make extra efforts to express only what is right and to say only yes to their superiors so as to please them are also complacent. Those who conform externally to authority by doing everything that the authority wants or that the person thinks the authority wants without any reflection on his part are also complacent. In this sense, complacency corresponds to utilitarian function of attitudes. A second way of being motivated is through identification. Unlike compliance, in which a candidate involves only external acceptance, identification is when a candidate or person, because of his insecurity, seeks to reinforce his wavering personality by identifying himself with another person or group, and therefore accepts the norms and the values of the group for the gratification and stability that these relationships provides for him. In this sense, such person adopts vocational values not because they are important themselves, but because they are important to him. In this sense, identification is ego-centered, which means the object is seen as being important for me, my self-satisfaction, self-interest, self-benefit. In that sense, a candidate or a person can accept vocational values,
Fader,
but he is motivated. Yes.
il traduttore di spagnolo non ha potuto seguirti e per quello ha bisogno di sapere per dove vai e se puoi parlare un po' più lento.
Lentamente.
Sì.
Okay. So adesso io nel quello di three different ways of being motivated.
Ok.
Okay.
Grazie.
And do I need to go back again? Okay, I just repeat.
Ok, grazie.
Okay. Three different ways of being motivated. Luigi Rula notes that there are three different ways of being motivated, and not all of them are positive. I mean that for those who enter the seminary, a candidate or a person who enter the seminary, they are motivated with three different ways, according to Rula. But these ways, not all are positive. For example, the first way he described as complacency, namely when a person accepts religious vocational values in the hope of gaining some rewards or avoiding some punishment controlled by another person, group, or institution. Attitudes are not adapted because the individual believes in their content, but simply in order to gain external incentives. The punishment or rewards are not necessarily physical, but more often psychological. Withdrawal of affection, non-consideration, inducing feeling of guilt. The candidate or person who has decided to enter the seminary or join the congregation in order to obtain a privileged social status may be complacent. Those who have rigidly observed the schedule for prayers, for example, but are motivated only by the desire to receive a good evaluation from others are complacent. So there are various examples of this complacence. A second way, I go to the next part. The second way of being motivated is through identification. Unlike compliance, in which a candidate involves only external acceptance, identification is when a candidate or a person, because of his insecurity, seeks to reinforce his wavering personality by identifying himself with another person or group. Therefore, accept the norms and the values of the group for the gratification and stability that this relationship provides for him. In this sense, such person adopts vocational values not because they are important in themselves, but because they are important to him. In this sense, identification is ego-centered, which means the object is seen as being important for me, for my self-satisfaction, self-interest, self-benefit. In that sense, a candidate or person can accept vocational values, but he is motivated by desires relating to his self-image, self-esteem, or to fulfill his basic needs. Some example of identification includes those who enter the seminary or join the congregation because they want to be liked or to be a copy of their uncle who is a priest. Hence, identification is also characterized by utilitarian attitudes. The third type of motivation identified by Luigi Rulla is internalization. It occurs when a person accepts and believes because it is congruent with his basic value system. In the context of religious vocation, it refers to a candidate or a person who is free and with full consent and responsibility, who is willing to accept those vocational values revealed by Christ so as to allow himself to be transformed by them and to become another Christ. A candidate or a person in this process of internalization gives and surrenders himself totally to Christ and to assimilating and personalizing the transcendent values of Christ. He adopts those vocational values of Christ because they are important in themselves. Therefore, the internalization of values has the price of renouncing the contrary needs that we have called dissonant, so as to let ourselves to be transformed and changed by the values of Christ. Only this kind of internalization permits a vocational decision that is truly free and not dependent on pressures of the family, group, or institution, or the unconscious needs of the candidate himself. So, dear brothers, as a conclusion, to study the motivations of the candidate or person for entering and leaving the seminary or congregation requires an understanding and awareness of some fundamental elements of their motivation. Those fundamental elements refers to some anthropological potentialities that construct and affect one's motivation. From those anthropological elements, we can answer questions regarding the genesis of motivation and the factors that influence that motivation. In fact, as regards formation program or activities, those information should be aware that motivational values can themselves lead to a growth in vocational maturity. In a sense, the formation process helps to transform, pointing in a more authentic direction, a person's motivation to the transcendental values of Christ. In this way, formation leads the candidate gradually toward the internalization of his vocational values and understanding with greater clarity and depth, to understand that it is the Lord who calls and motivates the choice. In the case of St. Vincent's vocation to serve poor, the internalization of vocational values is precisely the process of maturation that allows a person to be integrated into a consistent system of motivational values. Internalization and integration are thus a lifelong process of formation. Hence, it must be prepared for and shall begin in the initial formation. It means any formation program during the initial formation process have to be able to help the candidates to be aware of and internalize his vocational values and to guide the candidate so as to increase his capacity for vocational integration values, so as to free him from the negative influence of their subconscious life. So I can just say until there, the one I understand a little bit about Rula. Actually, a complete explanation on this I had sent last time already.
Ya les he enviado el artículo de todo esto. Ustedes lo tendrán.
I stress on motivation. Actually, 2 points that
Me enfoco en la motivación.
the perspective of Luigi Rula is on vocational and motivational values, vocational values and motivation. So according to me, this one has to be started from initial formation.
Okay. From this moment point, as a space for question remains open.
Transfer dan certificates posted on the site.
Okay, it's we very much appreciate the presentation, Neil. And we would like to have some time for questions now. So if those who are listening, please, if you have questions, you can either put them in the chat, or you can, if you go down to the bottom where you see this thing that says reactions, you can raise your hand, and that'll bring you up, and we'll see you, and you can ask your question directly, unmuting your microphone. So it's time for questions.
Yeah,
Matthew.
yeah, Miles. I just, Father Armino, I just have one question. You have explained very well the motivations, several motivations with which the candidates enter into the seminary. They enter the seminary with all kinds of motivations. Now, my question is, our task as formatives is to lead these candidates who are coming with the wrong motivations to get right motivations over the course of the seminary career. And in your experience, what programs in the minor seminary or in the major seminary would help this process of leading the seminarians who are having wrong motivation to the right motivation? What do you think the best program that we can have in the seminary for this process of leading those who are having wrong motivation to the right motivation? No,
You need to unmute your microphone, Armin. Unmute your microphone.
Oh, okay.
Thank you very much, Father Matthew.
Yes.
I'm just pick up the last, how do you call this? The last question that you have. What I have done, what we have done in the initial formation regarding the candidates in order for them from the wrong motivation to the new motivation. Actually, here I did a kind of format. No. First of all, as I have told you that in order to motivational values and motivation go in line. No. My proposal is to apply these vocational values in the initial formation, no, with a format. Now that's the first one. For example, we have a kind of instrumental values, the institutional ideals, no, a kind of instrumental values, and then we apply this in the initial formation. Now we make a format. In fact, we have that one. No? And the second one, because there are three kinds. No, those who have a conscious motivation is the first dimension according to Rula. No, that means that the person are conscious with freedom. No, to stay in the seminary. No? And we can find also this in the person, the candidates. No? But the second and the third dimension, for example, the third dimension regarding some kind of pathology, no? The psychologist supposed to be there to help them. So another proposal is to have a kind of psychological sessions too, psychological process in the initial formation. And that's for the third dimension because relating with pathology. No? For example, in Indonesia, for example, based on my own experience, no, the data that I collected, no, many candidates has a problem with coming from the families, no? Rooted in the families. So in this sense, when they enter the seminary, they have a problem with authority. No? They see the authority as something like they're afraid with the priest, they're afraid with the formators, like that. No, they are not free in dealing with them. In this sense, that belongs to the third dimension. No, it's not in the grave case, but we need a psychologist there to deal with that starting from the initial formation. No? And for the second dimension, according to Rula, something that real good and apparent good. I can say that real good means that the person who are honest, no? But another one is apparent good. It's kind of hypocrites, no? We cannot identify this. However, for this second dimension, according to me, no, the role of the formators are very important there. For example, the formators has to giving witness to build trust. No? In the sense that the presence of the formators has to be their models in the formation, because they look up at the formators. No? And the second one, they have to form a good community life and accompaniment. No, I'm still learning, how to live a community life. Especially in our community, we are living from multinationalities. Sometimes, as our senior father said, our older brother said, sometimes more difficult to deal with my companions, fellow formators, than with the candidates, with the seminarians. Very, very difficult. So forming a good community life and accompaniment, it is very important. However, another one for me, also aside from those two, what's also important is the formation of formators. Of course, I'm not a good formators too, but I had experience when we prepared in Rome. Was good. It was a good opportunity. A formation of a formators is very important. And then the other one is helping candidates to solve their personal problems. How we are going to help the candidate to solve their personal problems. Rula give one terminology for certain candidate. He said nesters. Nesters means that the candidate who are still in the seminary, but they are unconscious. They don't know what is the purpose they are there. So subconscious immaturity happening here. So the presence of the formators is to help them how they are going to help as I've shared already with you, there are some points before, no? But based on my experience, colloquium is also a way. That's why a formator has to be always in the seminary, no? Because sometimes we have a busy helping our people outside. Of course, it is very important, but we have as a formator, I think my mission now is in the seminary. It's the priority. So I have to be always there with them. No, we are eating together. There's no separation. No, we work together. No, for example, plant the corn, plant the vegetables. We are doing together. No, and when they carry, for example, the soils to build a kind of cake for the pigs, I also join with them. No, and also when they wash the dishes, for example, I join with them. No, in that simple way. No, and the colloquium and personal sharing. No, it is very important. No, and from there we are little by little helping them. Hopefully, I can answer your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, you can use the chat if you'd like, or you can raise your hand, use that button at the bottom. We'll see where we are. And we're open for questions.
I am Father.
Okay. Antonius, the floor is yours.
Yes. I am Father Antonius, CM from Indonesia. Father Armin, Skala Rubinian. Thank you very much, Father. Terima kasih.
Sama-sama, Father Antonius.
Yeah. I work in the internal seminary for now the second term. After 4 years, after I will go to Cameroon in province Father Emmanuel Tipam in Scholastica Cameroon. After that, I going to come back to Indonesia in internal seminary. When I first time I assignment in internal seminary 2007, I already practicing this theory rula. But my feeling, what is my sharing, my feeling as the formator, I feel the formant, the seminarian like this object, not subject. Because the formator looking for sometimes the needs, what is the psychological needs, also what is the values in the family. Sometimes we recollecting this area. Also, what the attitudes. In the first years, I assignment internal seminary, sometimes it's very difficult because not easy to recognize their motivation. Not easy because the hidden agenda is very impact the situation. But after that, I realized it's important for us, for me especially, to listen the seminarians, but even though every day, because I ask them to writing the journal writing. So I can notice what is the insight every day, the seminarian. Very helpful for me. Maybe the journal writing not sincere, not not what he feel. Maybe they also hidden what is motivation. But I feel this one is very important for me, helpful to the insight for me. I think this
Father, we're having connection problems. Did we lose him? I think we did. I think we lost his connection.
Your connection.
Yeah, Antonio is not seen.
Yeah. Well, in the meantime, so John would like to ask a question. Why don't we proceed with him? And if Antonius comes back, we'll put him back on. Brother Sojan?
Yes, good afternoon, fathers. Actually, for me, I'm very newly ordained, like 2-3 years only, or like, okay. But for me, I had a good experience with the internal seminarians here in India. And one of the things that I wanted to mention here, and also hopefully Father can help me, like Father was talking about the students or the candidates coming with some hidden motives, and we have to help them out in their occasion. No? But I found someone strange in the sense, for him, he is very clear about his life and he had no hidden motives. But for him to proceed ahead to become a priest or to proceed ahead to leave the congregation and get out, both the way it was not possible for him. No, he was not ready to say that I want to quit, nor I want to continue. But still he is in the kind of here and there kind of movement in his life. But he's very genuine, you know. And if we ask him to explain about his motivation to enter the seminary, it was very clear and it was a very genuine motivation. But now he is struck at some point of his the process of discernment. And then, but after his talking with the internal seminary director, he came with the right solution. Right solution. So when we receive candidates of this sort, how to proceed ahead sometimes becomes a difficult situation for any of us.
It is the question for me, that one?
Yeah.
Okay. We are all young. Even me also, I'm learning. No. Actually, I can describe this like this. No. If you observe for some plantation, the difficult part to grow is when they are very small part, no, the seeds, and then they grow. So as a farmer, they have to be really focused on this, on taking care of the plantation, because easily destroyed. No, in the Ratio Fundamentalis 2016, which is our guidelines information, also mentioned like that. No, nurturing the vocation. There, I think, is the role of the formators that which I have shared. It is very important there. No, it is like the plantation. No, however, remember that we are formators, true, but a true formators is Jesus Himself. No, He is the one. No, and we ask our founder to help us in this. No, and to identify the motivation of the person. Of course, it is not easy. Only God can do. However, the one I'm presenting is on the view of Rula. No, in the previous articles, I I explained about this inner potential, inner anthropological potentialities, something that form one motivation inside of the person. Actually, if, for example, rely on that explanation, easily for us to identify by looking at something outside the person. Of course, something inside is still mystery. For example, by looking at the tendency of the person, the tendency of the candidates. If, for example, the candidate has the tendency to do something merely for his self-benefit, not thinking of the community as a whole, no, it can be an indication, and there is a terminology there which talking about motivation. So on that article, I explained about this, no, the notion of motivation in every person according to Rula. No? From there, maybe Rula is trying to say that from there we can identify the motivation of the person. No? And then the 3 dimension, which I had said a while ago, I said a while ago, is also very important for us to see. No? But something that externally, no? That's why, as I have said, that the true formators is Jesus himself. No? We ask Jesus to help us. But there's also another instrument. For example, the psychologists can help us in this. No? Something that inside the person, the psychologists can help us. Just like the previous father, he shared the difficulties of applying this theory of Rula. Of course, we rely on the theory. No? However, because the challenge is how to be consistent in applying this theory, how in the area which maybe in not relating with this theory with a kind of different background, different nationalities, different culture, and all this. No? However, this theory can be important for us as a guideline to help us. No? However, remember that the role of reformators is very important. I think one of the important ones, as I've shared also with you, is the witness, the living witness, the witness of the reformators.
Thank you. Antonius is back. So Antonius, would you like to come back on?
Yes, Father. Thank you, Father. Sorry, this one is connection interrupted. Yeah. As I say, I have the difficulties when I accompany the young people, young seminarian, to be open, because he always hide their motivation. So I have some technique to writing, journal writing. But it's important for me, for us, also about the assessment psychological tests. This one is important because they are also reveal the psychological needs sometimes appear in the psychological test. This one is sometimes we have the conviction all the seminarian is good, is important for us as the formator. All the seminarian good intention. So now I feel freely to approach them, talking with them, share with them. But I want to highlight the encounter, sharing is important for me. Even though every day. But in my thinking, always say, what is how to criticize maybe the Rula. Rula is always like the Freudian theory, like the people is bad, the people have the psychological illness like that. sometimes I not really agree with like that, because the seminarian come with the special motivation. The formator should be effort to approach them with many ways. But I very thank you to Father Armin, because Father Armin give them some theoretical helpful for me to have the more fast insight about the Rula. But I still thinking how come to practicing this theory in formation. Thank you, Father Henan.
Your microphone, Armin?
Yes. Dear Father Antonius, actually, in this sense, I also in line with, in formation, we cannot just focus on something that a kind of judge the person. No? However, in my own approach is how we as the formators, by our life, by our living witness, and some tools that we have, we use them in order the candidate to move himself, because actually we are formators, but to support them so that they will see the reality, not to judge these things. Yeah, we have a different insight on Rula. There are various critics on the theory of Rula, but actually I'm not sure also if he worked information for many years. No, as I had explained also why I choose Rula in this in this sharing. One of the consideration, because he had a kind of studies on this. No, many years he studied on this. No, by a kind of analyzing, by living with them, interview, and all this. No, for many years, and then the theory that he presented to us, actually a kind of, for me personally, I found it helpful for me, because it's a kind of guideline for me personally. No, it's not only for a candidate, but for me personally, to see myself well. No, and also to ask the question, if, for example, my own motivation, no, if it's okay or not. No, to that one, of course, it is just only one instrument. We cannot apply immediately this one to the candidates. As I have shared, no, the challenge is there. We have to consider also if, for example, this theory can apply in this certain area or not. No, or this theory is useful just for me personally to form better myself. No, because in the initial formation, which based on my experience, what is important is the role of the formators, no? The living witness of the formators. That means that all this theory is for me personally, no? To reflect, just an additional instrument for me to see better myself, so that maybe by that I can give a correction for some mistakes that I have. Yeah.
Thank you, Father.
Good. We have another hand up for Greg Banyaga, the Philippines.
I would like to do a little sharing. I was a formator in the major seminary for 4 years before I went for further studies. And I remember telling the seminarians that the reason that why they are there in the seminary is to discern about their vocation. That is the reason, why we call it seminary. It comes from the word semen, which is the seed. So when they enter the seminary, they have the seed of vocation, and the seed of vocation can be nurtured And that is what we try to do in the seminary, the seminarians as well as the formators. But the primary responsibility, of course, for growing that seed of vocation is in the seminarian, in the candidate himself. Now, because of that, I always emphasize to them the importance of discernment and not to be obsessed with becoming a priest or even with becoming a Vincentian. Because sometimes when one is obsessed with becoming a priest, he will do everything in order to show to the formators that he is worthy to be a priest. And so the real motivation, the real person does not come out. You know? And that is the danger. You know? So that if somebody feels while he is in the seminary that according to his discernment, God is not calling him, I welcome that person and I tell him, you made a good discernment and now you decide to leave because you feel God is not, is not calling you to the priesthood. That is a real discernment. Now, if on the contrary, a person says, more and more I feel that this is my vocation, that God is calling me to be a priest or to be a Vincentian, then I accept that as well. And I tell him, you also made a good discernment. In other words, what I'm trying to say here is to emphasize discernment rather than, being too obsessed with becoming a priest or a Vincentian. I don't know whether you can comment on this, my own observation.
Yes, Father, it is very important point that you have pointed out. No? A discernment has to be done by everybody. No? Of course, in dealing with, you are right when you say that, no? When dealing with the candidates or the seminarians as a formators, sometimes we have a kind of terminologies, object of discernment, in the sense that we are trying to justify if this is suitable or not suitable, if this proper to continue or not proper to continue. However, this point of discernment is very important also in the formation in dealing with the candidates. But I get the point that also personal discernment is also very important for me personally, and also for the candidate personally. Maybe one of the challenges is how we are able to help the candidate so that they will make a good discernment on their vocation. Maybe that's the challenge, because as I share with you also, there are some unconscious needs revealed, no? As also the previous father said that, no, actually this is hide. They are hiding it very well. They hide this very well. No? But you point out with a kind, for me, maybe a kind of solution too, no? To help them to make a discernment. No, that's the first one. The challenge is how we are able to help them to make a good discernment on their vocation. No? And maybe one of the, how do you call this, because I presented about Rula, no? Of course there are many criticizing on him. No, I'm also agree with that because it's not perfect. However, the first dimension which addressed by Rula, talking about discernment, is also very important for me personally. As a Scalabrinian, for example, you as a Vincentian, for example, I as a Scalabrinian, I have to understand well what is the values that I have to embrace. No, I have to conscious with that, and I have to apply that information in my daily life with my brothers. No, it helps, I think, because the candidate will see those things, and after that they can also think their own. Maybe there's a simple way, one of the simple ways. No, aside from another instruments. No, I myself has to discern also very well my vocation. No, as father said before, no, I'm still young. No, even me also, I'm still young. But this discernment belongs to everybody. I myself have to make a discernment. If, for example, proper for me to do this or not proper for me to do this, because the candidates are looking for me. They look at us. No, it can help them to make a discernment in their vocation by the model that we show to them. The role of the formators also very important for me to help them to make a discernment of their vocation too. No? Aside from that, also which helping them to make a discernment, maybe also if, for example, we have a kind of intensive sharing and colloquium with them. No? Every just like another father also shared that to make a kind of personal talk with them. No, it is also very important to help them to make a discernment. No, so dear friends, what the challenge that I can see here is how to help them. No, that's why this kind of sharing is also very important for us to learn each other. No, for example, myself, I learned a lot of few things from you, from your experience, which is I'm grateful with that. No, however, still the challenge is how we what we are going to do so that the candidate will be able to make a good discernment on their vocation. That's the question. Yeah. So this question we have to think together, and what are the things that we can do so that they will able to make a good discernment.
Okay.
Another question.
Another question? This will be the last question.
Yes.
Okay, please.
Rowan. Father
All right,
Rowan.
Rowan.
Okay. Hello, Father Armin. Thank you very much for the very enlightening discussion about this points of Rula. I noticed that the discussion about the hierarchy of needs was very essential in the formation of the candidates, especially identifying what are those motivations that they are undergoing, or having, and also knowing that you yourself have a different charism. I understand that Scalabrinian has the charism for the welfare of the seaman, or of the welfare of the seafarers, isn't it, Father?
Yes. With seafarers, migrants, seafarers.
I could respect to that, Father, because I myself is a seaman before
really?
I went back to the formation. But when I went back, the first apostolate that I looked for was your office here in the Philippines in the Stella Maris, near our port area, wherein I would like to know what Scalabrinian is all about. And I found out that the migrants, workers in general, are your again your charism to take care of. No? So what my point I would like to drive here is that in determining the motivation of the candidates, what is the requirement needed for a formator to do this identification of motivation. Nowadays that we are faced with various distractions, no? Now in pandemic times, of course, the basic indicated in the hierarchy of needs is the sustenance, the basic to live. And those transcendental ones are just the latter. Once the formandi have already entered into the formation. But again, my question is, how do we equip the formator with regards to the condition nowadays? No? And second is, in particular to the charism, how are we going to help the candidate see if they are into the charism of particular congregation that they are applying for? So both of us have different charism, yet our missionary work is the same. That is the reason why, one of the reason why I went back to the seminary after my 7 years of regency. Ringing in my mind was the word of my formator during our pre-internal seminary, that being a Vincentian or a priest is just a bonus. Being a missionary is our really goal, meaning having find meaning in all our works as Christians. Whether you're a brother or a priest, it doesn't matter. We are all missionaries. But to be a priest is just a bonus. If God will call you to be one, well, it's up to your formator to see if you're really called to be one, to be in that calling. So again, Father, how do you discuss the Rula's discussion on the formator? Because it's very important that the formator would really connect to the formandi and the charism as well. That's all, Father.
Father Carlos. Yeah, Father Rowan. Yeah. So thank you very much for the question. As I have told you that Rula presented a guideline, no? And then I focus on the motivation, how to identify, according to Rula, a person's motivation. No? The three dimension, he presented the three dimension in human person, actually about the dynamic forms of habitual dispositions of openness to value. No? As you've said that there is degradation of value, there is the different level of values. No? Depends on the tendencies of the person. The basic one is natural values. No? When a person doing something merely for his self-satisfaction, but what is in the ground of this is instinct. For example, when I'm hungry, I want to eat something. If there is a question, if candidate has this kind also in the formation, maybe can be like that. No, doing something for his own self-satisfaction, for his self-benefits and all this. No, that's the basic one. No, he said that another one also, when the person doing something for his group, for example, for the benefit of the group. If you can see this information, of course, you can see, for example, a candidate who are there in the seminary, living there in order for his family. Now, the orientation of what he's doing is for the family. Now, at the end, as I have said with you, he will buy, he has the orientation to buy the things for his family, to contribute for the family. Runa also presented this. No, this also belongs to the basic values. No, as you say that there is different stages of values. No, And after that, there is also another one, which is they say that real good, to do the real one, but conscious. No? In the context of formation, of course, we have also this. No, is moral values. Rula said that these moral values. No, and the last one, he said that religious values. When a person open himself totally to be integrated by Jesus. No, and then he allow himself so that those vocational values change his life. No, and that's the top one. And then from the 3 dimension of in the human person, he said that this belongs to the first dimension. When the person are conscious, freedom, all this as a guidelines in order for us to see, according to Rula, to see the various motivations appear in a person or in a candidate. No? And then second one, in this now in this situation now, no, how we are able to strengthen the motivation of the candidate, looking at our advancement of technology and all this, no, and you know, one of the case in Indonesia lately, a brother is not belongs to our congregation. He committed suicide because of the internet. He used the internet, no, and then for a wrong, I don't call this, he used wrongly the internet. No, he has a kind of sex chat with the people, and then this person wanted to publish, no, and because of that he committed suicide. No, yeah. In this kind of situation, there are various people who say that to allow the candidates, the students, to use the phone is okay, so that they will be mature. However, maybe to remind them of not using the phone in this certain stage of formation, also good, looking at that kind of situation. Okay. However, in that example of situation, how myself dealing with the candidate in my under my guidance, how I'm going to strengthen their motivation. No, and as I pointed out before, I stress on the role of the formators. Yeah, because I gave a kind of example. For example, if, for example, you have a kind of plantation, a difficult one to form them when they were when they were small. No, it is very difficult because they will die easily. No, so if you are talking about the initial formation, according to me, and this is a proposal from Rula too, the role of formators is very important. No? The roles. What are the roles? As I've said also before, like giving witness to building the trust, because the trust of the candidate is also very important, especially in that kind of in the particular stage of formation, this initial formation. The trust is very important. No, giving witness. Giving witness, like a while ago, Father said that discernment. We have to discern also, even formators ourselves, if we are really, our life is really just like what our founders wanted us to be. No? The values that our founder has presented to us. No? We have to embrace this. It's not easy, but we have to discern this. Living witnesses like that. No? And also, by that, they will trust. If, for example, we are just like that kind of example that I've told you, that I cannot say that brothers commit suicide totally wrong. Maybe because in the community was not okay. Maybe a formator was not really concerned. So what he had done is like that. No, he looked for outside. He looked for something else outside. Okay. Forming a good community life is very important. Yeah, I share also this. You know, one of our elder brothers, senior, said that, you know, for me it's very difficult to deal with my fellow brothers, formators, than to deal with the candidates. No, forming a good community life is very important because they can feel it. Now, this is also in relating with the trust that they have, and also the, forming a good accompaniment. Also, it's good. It is very important, no? So my proposal is, if a formator, our mission has to be inside. For us, as you said, you're right. We are for the migrants, refugees, and seafarers. But I am in the formation. I'm in the formation since I was a brother. When I did my pastoralian formation. Then after that, I was in the same house also for 4 years, philosophy, as a student. Then after that, pastoral year, the same house. And then after that, diaconate, the same house. And then priest in the same house. Then I went to Rome. I come back in the same house also because of the pandemic. I'm not able to go to the Philippines, no? As I supposed to be there. So on the same house for many years, no? So our mission, actually for the migrants, refugees, and seafarers. But what we are trying to do now is, the candidate is the migrants that I have to serve.
All right. I think we're needing to begin to bring this to a close. We very much appreciate it. Padre Javier, ¿tú vas a dar inicio o vamos a Hugo o quién va a terminar la sesión?
Supongo el Padre Javier, o no sé si está Matthew. Javier, el micrófono está apagado.
Javier will do.
Okay.
Vale. Bueno, yo puedo decir ya una palabra para terminar. Ante todo, en nombre de la congregación, quiero agradecer al Padre Armin esta conferencia, esta reflexión. Yo creo que ha servido porque prueba de ello son las intervenciones numerosas que ha habido, lo cual quiere decir que este tema ha suscitado un interés en todos nosotros, ¿no? Es un interés porque ha tocado un tema que es muy vital en la formación, como es el tema de la motivación, con todas las implicaciones que este tema tiene, como motivaciones conscientes, inconscientes y tantas otras como hay, ¿no? Yo de este tema solamente quiero subrayar la importancia que tiene tres cosas para la motivación, para formar y para ver las motivaciones, ¿no? Primero, la importancia, aquí lo ha dejado muy de manifiesto el padre Armin, la importancia de los formadores. Lo más importante en la formación es que haya formadores y formados. Esto es lo más importante. Pero formadores preparados, porque si no están preparados, si no tienen las actitudes convenientes, pues la formación siempre será muy coja, muy en fin, un poco vacía, ¿no? Entonces, la importancia de eso, se ha mencionado incluso la preparación de formadores, o sea, estos cursos que la congregación está impulsando, la formación de formadores, ¿no? A través de la formación de formadores, que puede ser la escuela de Rula u otras escuelas. Pero lo importante es que haya una preparación. Yo creo que esto ha calado ya en la congregación y todas las provincias están muy de acuerdo en que sus formadores tienen que estar preparados. La segunda cosa que ha subrayado también el padre Armin en para formar las motivaciones es la comunidad. La comunidad para nosotros la comunidad es un elemento esencial, como para todos la vida consagrada. Ahí es donde tiene que hacerse la formación de las motivaciones. Y el tercer elemento, también importante, subrayado también aquí en esta conferencia, es el discernimiento. El discernimiento, si no hay discernimiento, difícilmente se pueden captar cuáles son las motivaciones. Bien, pues este tema, yo como he querido subrayar solamente estos tres matices, estos tres temas, pero hay otros muchos que han servido también. Nuevamente, Padre Armin, te agradezco en nombre de la congregación tu tiempo y tu intervención y tu reflexión. Gracias.